Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to your weekly episode of the BBC, the Best Books channel. And may we please welcome this week's guest. Our first guest, Mason Fanning.
Hey, host Oscar, and hello, audience.
Hi. And our second guest, Alex Marks.
Hello, Oscar. How are you doing today?
Good, thank you. And last but definitely not least, Charlie Robinson.
Hello, Oscar. G'day, audience.
All right, now that the guests have been introduced, today we're going to talk about Marcus Zuzak's new novel, The Messenger, a book about a seemingly boring, ordinary man, Ed Kennedy, who was challenged by an unknown benefactor to become a better person by helping others through a series of assignments given to him on the aces from a deck of playing cards that he receives in the mail. So let's start off with the characters. Charlie, what did you think about the characters?
Yeah, well, as you said, we have the main protagonist, Ed Kennedy. He's a 19-year-old taxi driver who lives in suburban Australia. He lives in an old rundown house with his dog and his strained relationship with both his family and parents. His main hobbies are playing cards, reading, and walking around town. He generally seems like a good guy, just finding his way through challenges while demonstrating different themes and styles throughout the novel. At the start of the novel, Ed shows himself as an average failure in society, but over time, he redeems himself with acts of heroism, heading towards his true potential through helping others. Mason, were there any other characters you found interesting in this book?
Yes, Charlie, very well described, by the way. I think all the characters in this book all played integral parts in constructing different styles, themes, scenes, and emotions. Although I'm interested in how Ed described the robber. He describes the robber as a redhead and, according to Ed, extremely ugly. Ed commits a seemingly heroic act by stopping the bank robber from escaping, and the robber is sentenced to 6 months in jail. He threatens Ed by saying that he is a dead man. At the end of the novel, the robber gets into Ed's cab as a customer and instructs him to drive past all the addresses Ed visited in his missions. This reveals that in every event in the novel, including the failed bank robbery, was orchestrated by the man with the cards. The bank robber says being arrested and going to jail was worth it because the mission has completely changed Ed's life for the better. Oscar, what did you think about the characters in this book?
Oh, thank you for that, Mason. I totally agree. I also thought that it was very interesting how Zuzak made his main protagonist almost the embodiment of ordinary when it comes to life. And it really contributed to the overall message of the novel, as it showed that anyone has the power to better themselves in the world around them. It just takes that initiative, and we just have to act on it first. And Ed's character had a lot of character progression in the book, especially when you compare from the beginning to the end of the novel. He goes from an antisocial loser to somewhat of a from a hero. However, I do think the fact that he was being forced to do it through writing and fate took away from the message, because most likely without it being written that he would do it, would he really? It also opens a jar of questions like for how long was Ed being written to act a certain way? Were his actions really of his own free will? It would be interesting to know these questions, but other than that, let's move on. What about you, Mason? How do you think Zuzak incorporated the themes?
Well, I think Marcus did an alright job of incorporating themes such as heroism, sainthood, and ordinariness. Ed Kennedy, a 19-year-old cab driver with no ambition or close personal relationships, feels like the heroism and sainthood others have attained are impossible for a person as ordinary as himself. However, after Ed embarks on a mission of doing good deeds for strangers, those he helps to begin view him as a hero or saint. When the man who gave Ed his mission arrives at the end of the novel, he reveals to Ed that the mission was meant to show how even a person as ordinary as Ed can become capable of heroic and saintly acts. Alex Marks, what are your thoughts on the themes that reside in The Messenger?
Well, I thought the theme of hope, caring, and beauty really outlines the other themes of this book. Ed believes his community to be generally hopeless because, in his opinion, everyone in his neighborhood is self-centered. However, after Ed receives receives mission to help others through a series of playing cards himself by showing others his care for them.
Thank you for your input, Alex. I agree with you about the themes that are represented. I also believe that one of the main themes written was heroism, as you see Ed grow throughout the story, saving other people before he can finally save himself. So, Mason, do you have any other themes that you found interesting in the book?
I completely agree with you, Oscar. And I think that this theme you were just talking about correlates with another important theme that resides in this: circumstance versus choice. These themes link into each other because Ed discovers that the instructions, and in fact his entire life for the past year, were controlled by one man. Once the man withdraws his control from Ed's life, Ed realizes his choice now it is his choice now how he lives his life. Ed's progress throughout the novel, taking charge of his own life, shows that while one cannot control the circumstances that dictate their life, one can choose how to react to those circumstances. A quote that demonstrates this theme can be found in Three of Diamonds when Audrey says, "Something is going to happen at each of these addresses on that card, Ed, and you'll have to react to it." And I think that overall, themes heavily contribute to the style of this book, which I'll now hand over to Charlie.
Yeah, well, Audrey is Ed's friend and his love interest. She is an underage cab driver just like Ed. She does not allow herself to love anyone because her family was abusive to her as a child. As a result, she only goes to men she does not care about, like her boyfriend, Simon, and will not sleep with anyone she does care about, like Ed. She becomes uncomfortable when Ed begins to change as a result of his missions to help others. Her reactions show how finding a purpose in life, like Ed does in the novel, can require the sacrifice of one's casual relationship with others. As directed through the Ace of Hearts, Ed helps Audrey by helping her allow herself to feel love for him, just for 3 minutes. At the end of the novel, Audrey comes to Ed and asks to move in with him, showing that she has learned to allow herself to become more vulnerable enough to openly care about and depend upon another person. It says right here, I'm looking for this, I tell her, and I wave my hand at both of us. I'm looking for you and me together. This quote shows a tight bond relationship between Ed and Audrey and shows us the distinguished relationship that grew between them over time through the novel.
Thank you, Charlie. That quote perfectly encapsulated the character of Audrey. Very interesting. Also, Charlie, what are your thoughts on the styles of the book?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think the style of this story really unfolds is very engaging, especially since you never know what's going to happen in terms of the cards or what will happen through Ed as he goes to complete his challenge. A quote that supports this engagement in the book is Wednesday. However, I actually made it out in the street and headed across town. It's nearly midnight when I turn into Edgar Street. It's dark, the streetlights there have been rocked. Only one survives, and that one winks at me. It's a light that limps from the globe. It's a while before Ed goes to Edgar Street, let alone does anything about the problem there. We think it's important to see the guy struggling to go a couple times, so we don't take the situation lightly. He isn't just playing a game here, because this is very real and scary to Ed. The story comes out in a very descriptive and emotional way, as Ed goes through his passage and finds that life is more beautiful and kind than what he thought before when he started the good deeds. Alex?
Yes. Well, when I read the book, the first thing that came to me is that the style in which Ed is portrayed is as a super down-to-earth, low-key guy. He brings almost no ego talk into the story. It's like he doesn't have any pretentious bones in his body, which makes it so much more engaging. Whenever Ed speaks to us or narrates for us, we don't need an English teacher to interpret his lines because he's always straightforward with us. Time and time again in the book, we see how relatable Ed can be. When he goes to the party after the big sledge game, he flatly proclaims, "No one recognizes me. No one speaks to me." That one line tells us that he doesn't try to present himself in a more favorable light, and he doesn't need to hold back on how he views himself. I think we can all relate to the open and down-to-earth way Ed speaks and the style in which he was written.
Yes, Alex. I agree that emotions and scenes are described by Marcus in a way that also describes the themes of this book. This contributed to my experience reading this book, and I can say it was a very diverse reading pattern of different events. Some parts of this book can be very mundane, whereas other parts that will keep you on the edge of your seat. And I think Marcus Cusack has done this on purpose to keep the reader engaged in each individual character's persona, and this contributes to emotions and different styles of scenes and characters in this book.
Thank you for that evaluation, everyone. That was very informative. But with all that done, overall, this book is an amazing read. It has a very interesting and engaging story that really challenges the reader's perception of themselves. The ending was a great use of the fourth wall by directly addressing the reader and revealing the real message was to you all along. Overall, I would rate the book a solid 7 out of 10. A good read if you're up for it.
Yeah, I'd say my experience with this book, I'd give it a 5 out of 10.
Yeah, nice. I reckon an 8.5, I'd say. I think it was a really good read and really encapsulated everything that there is to a good novel. So yeah, 8.5 for me.
So I was in my own head. What I thought about the book. The book, I didn't really connect with the tones in the book, and I just didn't really like the way it was written. So I'm going to flatly proclaim that it's a 2 out of 10. It was not enjoyable for me. I didn't like it. Terrible, to be honest. But I read it anyway, and we're reviewing it now. So other people can read it out there, but for me, it's not good. Not good at all.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for watching and tuning in to this week's episode. And also thank you all for the guests. Big round of applause to all of you. But please tune in next week when we read Mein Kampf and find out how Hitler really did it. Thank you all and good night.
Good night.